Gate. Thus the Sorcerer's Kingdom fought thereby. Erblivin 2991 copy editor. Warded 46 proofread by Pervice Object. Thank you for reading my fanfic. My mother language is not English, so please be patient about any grammatical issues that my personal slave, El Pervy, might have missed. I don't own the Overlord, BRDO, novel or anime series created by Kugin Maruyama. I don't own Gate, Gyutenkan no Kainite, Kekutokari novel, and anime series, written by Tekmi Yaneti. I also am not responsible for those despicable acts of sexual depravity that El Pervy committed upon the sexy-looking Nautil in the poor, innocent tree in his backyard. Please review my story. I know I will make mistakes that I intend to correct and will try to learn from my mistakes and improve myself. Thank you. Please enjoy the story. Chapter 3. Just some exploring and administration. 2 weeks before the expedition force arrived in the special region, Legate Octavian's eyes popped open. What came into his vision was a strange ceiling. It was made with stone and had white glowing objects embedded in it. He tried to look around to understand how he got there but realized his head wouldn't move at all. Then he remembered what happened before everything went blank. Those monsters, he gulped as he thought about this. He tried to move his limbs and his head. It was not just his head, but he couldn't move his entire body. It was as if something was tied around his wrists, ankles, waist, and chest. This incomprehensible situation filled him with fear, and he wanted to scream, but something was stuck in his mouth, so he could neither speak nor close his mouth fully. When he desperately tried to look around by straining his eyes, a voice spoke. "Oh my, you're awake now. The others have not awakened yet. But don't worry, they will be awakening when their time comes." The creature had a guttural voice. It was hard to tell whether the voice belonged to a man or a woman. It had the body of a human, but the head of a deformed octopus. The 6 long, squirming tentacles attached to its head extended all the way down to its thighs. The thing that appeared in his unmoving sight was a disgusting monster. The skin color was milky white, like the waxy flesh of someone who had drowned. On the bloated, corpse-like body was clothing made with black leather which barely covered anything. The cloth wrapped tightly around its body, like butcher's twine tying up a piece of meat, and it could be described as nothing but grotesque. If a beauty had worn it, it would have been attractive, but on a monster like this, it was nauseating. On each hand were 4 webbed fingers. It had long fingernails, with strange and bizarre nail art on them. Then he heard another voice. But it was clearly a female one. The other female snickered as she walked into his field of vision. The legate clearly saw who it was. She was a woman around 20 years old, with short blonde hair and delicate features, vertically split red pupils, 2 cat ears on the top of her head and a tail that sprouted from the upper part of her butt. Her armor was a revealing top with a short battle skirt and 2 black feathered angel wings sprouted out from her back. Kukuka. Naya. Has our guest finally awakened, Naya? As you say, Clementine-chan. Our guest has finally woken up, answered the abomination. This strange metamorphic being turned its pupil-less white, blue eyes on him. Fuff, did you sleep well? HFF, 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 HFF. The legate could not answer because of the mouth lock in his mouth. Fear and panic welled up within him. Gripped by those 2 emotions, he could only let out a harsh breathing noise. The monster touched his cheek softly like a mother trying to calm a scared child. But the cold and mushy feelings of the hand sent chills all over his body. It would have made perfect sense if the pungent smell of blood or rotten flesh had wafted over, but the creature smelled like fragrant flowers. This only amplified his fear. My, to think it'd shrink this much. There's no need to be scared. Clementine sat on his groin and leaned above him. Naya. You smell delicious. I don't even know what to do with you first. Play with you or simply torture you until you lose your mind. The last is more tempting, by the way. Naya. The legate's eyes widened. The 2 monsters' gaze was towards his lower body. From the sensation of air on his skin, he realized that he was completely naked. Kukuka, snickered the bloated creature. First the work, Clementine-chan, then the pleasure. You know the supreme beings will not tolerate failure. Naya. You are boring, Renes-chan. But if this is the supreme being's wish, then so be it. She shot a lustful glance towards the legate. Mind if I ask your name? It tapped its slender finger on its cheek and tilted its head while asking. The pose would have looked good if it was a beauty, but a monster that looked like a drowned corpse with an octopus for a head only evoked disgust and fear. The legate did not answer. The monster smiled at the terrified man who could only move his eyes. The tentacles covered its mouth, and its expression barely changed. Despite that, he knew it was smiling because its bead-like eyes had narrowed. Clementine chuckled. Fuff, it seems our guest is shy. Nah. Fuff. How cute. Don't be so shy. Rennis leaned above him. The monster's fingertip slid across his chest as if it was writing something, but all he could feel was fear that felt as if his heart was being ripped out. Ensan will tell you her and her sister's names first. It was a seductive and sweet tone of voice that sounded as if heart marks would pop out of them. I'm the Great Tomb of Nezarec Special Information Gatherer, Nrenist. Hey, and this cute girl above you is my assistant and helper Clementine Chen. Clementine waved and smiled with a seductive expression. It is nice to meet you, Naya. They also call us interrogators. The long tentacles squirmed apart and revealed a circular mouth at their base of the tentacle. Amidst rows of razor-sharp teeth, a tube that resembled a tongue came out. It truly looked like a red straw. Clementine used her long nails to damage the skin on the legate's chest a little bit. Small drops of blood started to flow from the injury. The legate was utterly terrified seeing the two monsters' sadistic games. He knew many torturing tactics. He had even participated in many torture scenarios. But he never thought about what his victims might be feeling when the torturers were torturing them. He felt fear like never before. He knew the Empire brought the wrath of the gods upon themselves when the Emperor sent an invading force to this world. And he prayed to Emroy, the god of darkness, to make his death be as painless as possible and to take the damn fool mold with him. Yet he wanted to live. He wanted to survive. He wanted to be out of this horrifying place. Screw the Empire. Screw the Emperor. I just want to live. He pleaded in his soul. Now. You were captured by us. Kukukuka. Indeed. You will be our new toy. Naya, please entertain us, said the blonde woman playfully. But you don't even know where you are. Right? Teased him the bloated creature. Rennis laughed. Should we tell him? Naya. Asked Clementine. Rennis nodded and then turned back to him. This is the Great Tomb of Nezarec. The place where two of the 41 supreme beings, Ain Sama and Es Sama, reside. It is the holiest of places in the entire Sorceress Kingdom. Hein Sorwa. Eswaf Sorwa. Yes, Ain Sama and Es Sama. Rennis nodded. Rennis and Clementine understood him perfectly despite his inability to speak properly. Clementine jumped down beside her and started to prepare the torture tools. They are two of the 41 supreme beings. Ain Sama ruled over the other supreme beings in the past, and he is very, very cool. If you look at him once, you'll want to swear loyalty with all your heart, and Es Sama enforces his will by any means necessary. Rennis paused for a moment. She led his armies through the trenches of the enemy lines and crushed them without hesitation. She developed a very cool torturing device, you know. She even bestowed one to me to make my job easier. Fuff. The supreme beings are truly generous towards us lowly beings. She fidgeted, jiggled as if she was embarrassed. Hey, do you want to hear something? The two of them are gods, but they still remained amongst us. They did not abandon us. This is why we always remain faithful towards them and pray that the other 39 will return one day. What? Gods? Impossible. But thinking back about those creatures. If we attack the domain of gods, oh, Emroy. Save us. Like a timid girl playing with her finger, she traced letters across his naked body. Clementine finished the preparations of the torturing tools. Rennis Chen. I prepared the tools. Naya. Rennis turned her tentacled face back to him. How unfortunate. It makes my body feel electrified. Ara, I'm sorry. I've been talking only about myself. The way her body twitched in delight called to mind the writhing movements of a giant, squirming maggot. Don't mind me. Rennis ignored his thoughts and continued. Now, should I tell you about your fate? Do you know what a choir is? He blinked at the unexpected question. Looking at his surprised expression, Rennis assumed he did not know what a choir was and explained. A choir is a group of people that sings hymns praising God's love and glory. I want you to become one of them, along with all your little friends. He turned his eyes with a great deal of effort and saw his other soldiers bound to the torturing tables beside him. If that was all, then it wasn't much. He wasn't very confident in his singing, but he was not tone deaf either. But was this monster really talking about something like singing? He could not hide his unease that arose like the tide and died in Rennis. Sing us the melody of your suffering. Naya. Said Clementine playfully. That's right, a choir. Even fools like you that haven't sworn loyalty to the supreme beings can dedicate their voices to sing their praises. The goal is a chorus. Ah, how electrifying. It's Nrenes gospel music devoted to the supreme beings. A cloudy color spread in its revolting eyes. Was that because it was excited by its thoughts? Its fingers wiggled like worms. Fuff. Now I'll introduce you to the ones who will support you in your chorus. As if they had been waiting in a corner, several figures came into view. He stopped breathing the moment he saw them. It was obvious that they were evil creatures. It was as if Hardy's demons from the ancient tales had come alive. Black leather aprons clung tightly to their figures. Their skin was ghastly pale, almost transparent, and dark veins were visible as if their blood was purple. They wore tight black leather masks with no visible openings, which made him curious about how they could see or breathe. Their arms were long as well. They were about 2 meters in height, but their arms were long enough to reach their knees. Each of them had a belt on their waist, with numerous tools hanging off them. There were 4 of them in total. They're torturers. They're going to help me and Clementine Chan assist you and your little invader companions sing a beautiful song. A dangerous premonition. He finally realized what it meant by singing and struggled to escape. However, he still could not move. It's no use. It's not going to break from someone of your strength. They'll cast healing magic over and over, so you can get plenty of opportunities to practice. Nrenes said this as though she were extending the hand of mercy to him, but she did so in the cruelest of tones. Thnd Jomus. Don't do this. Pleaded the legate. Ira. It seems our guest does not want to participate in the chorus. Don't you think that is quite rude of him, Nrenes Chan? Naya. Indeed, Clementine Chan. It is rude for a guest to refuse to sing in the chorus. Please sing to us your melody for the supreme beings. Pretty please. Nrenes spoke softly to the man who had tears rolling down from his eyes. Then the 6 tentacles squirmed. Listen well. Because the 2 of them remained, we, who were created by the 41 supreme beings, were allowed to exist. Our very existence is to serve Aunt Sama and Est Salma. Do you think we'll show even a shred of mercy to some filthy thieves who invaded the domains of our gods? Web after Lero GWPPH. ICFWDGILNFETHSPPFNDSGAGN. We're really sorry. It will not happen again. Hera, that's right. Regret is a valuable thing. Shall we start the song, Clementine Chan? Naya. Let's start it. I hope they will last longer than the previous ones. Naya. She licked her lips. Nrenes picked up a thin rod from somewhere. At the end of the rod were spikes that were roughly 5 millimeters long. Let's start with this. Nrenes kindly explained every little detail to the man who didn't understand anything about the tool. My creator used to suffer from a bit of a problem called kidney stones. To pay respects to that, we'll start with this. Since it became so small, I don't think we'll have much problem putting it in. Thnd Jomus. Don't do this. Nrenes took its face closer to the man who was screaming out in the realization of what would happen to him. We're going to spend a long time together. You shouldn't start crying because this is only the beginning. Clementine Chan waited a long time for new recruits for a chorus. Clementine chuckled while her face twisted into an unnaturally wide smirk. Let the song begin. Naya. Scene change. Ulapianka, Imperial Castle. Each day, hundreds of lords and nobles would visit the Imperial Castle. The Empire used all its effort and resources to build it as huge and ostentatious as the Empire was able to, showing their strength to the allied countries, ensuring their loyalty. After all, the Empire enforced its rule mostly through a show of force, not diplomacy. The castle was always a busy place to be. Senators, nobles, and courtiers came in one each day, treating politics like a chore. Under the meetings, they would enjoy delicious foods, graceful dancers, gambling, courting before engaging in dialogues. That was the general feel of it. The nobles might even decide on the deployment of armies based on the number of games they played. However, in the current situation, this was not the case. Now all of them looked worried. According to what the returning troops had reported, the enemy was not even human. They were more like demons with incredibly powerful magic that shattered the sky, raised the dead, and even summoned the demons have hardied from her underworld residence. According to the reports, the battlefield was like the gods themselves had allied with each other just to punish the Empire for its sins. All senators and nobles knew the Empire was far from perfect, but what had they done to deserve such punishment from the gods? No one knew, and because of this, they were afraid. Also, because no one knew what could offend the gods to cause them to rain such punishment, they did not know how to make it right. This is why no one could appreciate the good music, food, and the dancers that the palace offered to its guests. Their stomachs churned and just could not take any of the food and drink after reading the report of the crushing defeats. After all, they had just lost that which caused the empire to hold its dominant position among the countries while it was under the reign of Emperor Moltsul Augustus, their overwhelming military force and wealth. Even a child would know that these were the reasons that the empire was feared by many countries. Now, the empire could be said to have lost an arm. As the generals and nobles in the court were part of the expedition, there was an enormous amount of casualties. With such an outstanding number of dead people, the nobles had to spend their day rushing around from one funeral to another. The emperor himself hosted the ceremony with mourning clothes, and yet the lazy days of the imperial castle continued. Your Majesty, the Alliance army has suffered a major defeat. The dead and missing have reached 60,000. If we include the ones who were wounded but are still able to resume their duties, it is around 100,000. The survivors of the Alliance army have each returned to their respective countries. These numbers had not included the ogres, goblins, and giants. The demi-humans, which had inferior intelligence, were treated like warhorses. Hearing Domestic Minister Marquis Marcus report, the emperor nodded his head tiredly. Just as planned. The cowardly senators who were afraid after we suffered some losses have nothing to worry about anymore. What about the other expedition force? The senator gritted his teeth before answering to his emperor. They're gone, my emperor. What? Emperor Molt's eyes widened. What did you just say? They're gone. The returning soldiers spoke about some kind of army of gods. Most of them went insane. The emperor sighed hearing the shocking news. Bring before me the highest-ranked survivor. One of his guards saluted respectfully and went to fetch the survivor. But Emperor, the movement of the enemies from beyond the gates is a huge concern. According to our scouts, both enemy armies managed to build a fortified fortress around the structures. The senator continued. This is disconcerting. But the Empire has won against greater odds before. The Empire will survive no matter what. Stated Emperor Molt as he supported his head with his fist and looked to the sidelines with a bored expression. Forgive me, Your Majesty. But I do not share your opinion about our situation. I am concerned. It is bad enough our first expedition force has been repelled with such ease. But our second expedition army's defeat was crushing to the Empire. We lost 2/5 our overall military strength. Still, it is not a problem in the long term. The distance between the capital and the Holy Dell and Arns Hills is great. We just use this strategic position of ours to our advantage. The enemy will have to penetrate deep into our territory to reach the capital. We will simply use the scorched earth tactic combined with attacks upon their supply lines. No army can march without supplies. The emperor continued. If the enemies started moving their pieces, all of the cities and villages leading up to the empire should be burned down, the wells poisoned and the food seized to the last grain of wheat. Therefore, amidst the scorched earth, no army could obtain supplies, and thus this will stop their advancement. With this, no matter how strong their army and their mages might be, a chance for them to show their weakness would arise. If there was no way to forage for supplies locally, supplies would have to be sent from their own country. It would be a substantial burden on their horses, and the supply line would have to be guarded against occasional bandit raids. This way, the enemy's fighting potential would be greatly diminished the closer they got to the capital, giving the Empire's army the advantage when fighting near the capital. If they built strongholds at various locations and forced the enemies to bleed, the enemies would gradually crumble under pressure. Such was the basis of this world's military science. Make the enemies advance deep into the enemy's territory and hit them when they're tired. Without a doubt, it was an easily understandable and efficient tactic in any world. However, scorched earth tactics would turn their own lands into crisp soil, and it would be hard to undo the damage. Such tactics disregarded the livelihoods of the people by robbing them of their food and water, and the support of the people would be lost. Thus, the people would have resentment towards the government that would last for generations. Considering all these cons, it was hard to issue such orders politically. However, the tax revenue would decrease. Marquis Marcus used a reserved manner to articulate the damage that would be done to the people. The emperor only said HMPH. Just cancel a few planned parades and postpone the plans for the imperial villa. And with this, Emperor Molt dismissed the concerns. For the mighty empire, the suffering of the people and the approval of the citizens were merely trivial details. There was talk of Marquis Kessel making a fuss. Why do I have to care about Marquis Kessel's sanity? It seems like he and some of the senators are conspiring to declare a state of emergency council. The Senate's council could veto the orders from the emperor. The Senate even had the power to dismiss the emperor. In the history of the empire, the number of cases where the thrones of emperors were threatened due to the council from the Senate was not low. HMPH, how interesting. Just let them do what they want. Who knows, this may be a chance to round up all of those conspirators at the same time. Order the Privy Council to look into this matter. Marcus had an astonished expression on his face for a second, but he still bowed respectfully towards the Emperor. The Emperor's weapon against the Senate was a crime of treason. It required the Privy Council to present evidence in order to sentence them. It seems like many have taken the privilege of being a senator for granted. It looks like it's time to remove the weeds. Both Marcus and Emperor Mold looked in the direction of the knocking footsteps on the marble floor. All of them saw a young man approaching them at the end of the throne hall. He wore a standard butler uniform with a vest and white butler gloves. One of his eyes was covered with an eye patch and the other dimmed with a faint blue light. On his handsome young face, a bland, expressionless settled. He almost reached Mold and Marcus. The Emperor guards ran out from behind the columns of the throne room and created a wall of shields before their Emperor. Emperor Mold, despite his surprise, still kept his arrogant, superior expression. "Humph. Who are you, boy? I do not remember sending for you." The young man bowed his head. However, the Emperor, despite his long years of politics, could not read anything from his bland face. It was a completely boring and expressionless look. "I'm Zero Reddy, the faithful servant of the Supreme Beings." Supreme Beings? Never heard of them, thought Mold. "Humph. And why are you here?" "I don't know of any senator that is called a Supreme Being," the Emperor haughtily said as he mocked Zero. "I bring a message from the Sorcerer King, Ainzuldown," he said in his still calm and collected tone. "Never heard of him in his country. He must be a ruler in a small backwater country at Fevenai. The Emperor of the St. Aaron Empire did not hear about him. He must be an insignificant ruler." The stranger's eyes squinted, and he disappeared. The Honor Guard started to search for him. "He most likely chickened out and left," the Emperor said in a mocking manner. Then he felt someone grabbing his tunic and raising him into the air. "Don't try my patience, meatbag. My masters are patient, but the same could not be said for me. I don't care if you mock me. But if you mock the Supreme Beings in their domain, that means you mock my creator and my gods," he said in an extremely cold tone. A cold sweat ran down everyone's spine. Emperor Mold struggled to break out from his grasp. Despite the thin frame of his arms, his grasp was unreasonably strong. It was like he was being choked by Rory the Reaper, the apostle of Emroy. "What gods do you serve, boy?" "Emroy. Hardy. Pelopon and Duncan." His smug expression remained. "I don't know anything about those pathetic beings of whom you speak. But if they rebel against the Supreme Beings, they will be annihilated." The Emperor just smiled as he struggled in the boy's grasp. One of the guards tried to stab him in the back with a spear. But as the spear reached his opponent's back, it simply broke into pieces. The young man glanced over his shoulder towards his attacker with a still bored expression on his face. "Kill the guards." He gave the order with a cold, emotionless tone. The guards started to collapse all at once as many 8-edged assassins appeared from their hiding places and slit the guards' throats with one simple move. The guards quickly drowned in their own blood. The 8-edged assassins are magical beings with a human-like body shape that wear a black spider ninja costume which has 8 legs that are like keen blades. They are capable of rendering themselves invisible passively, and they can suspend themselves on a ceiling like a bat. Each of their 8 legs allowing them to stick to the ceiling, attached with a razor. The moment they leap towards their prey, it could launch 8 simultaneous strikes. Their ability is to kill their prey with a single blow to the head. Marcus and the Emperor's eyes widened seeing his veteran honor guards killed so easily by the suddenly appearing creatures. Zero threw Mold to his seat, then he threw beside his head a knife. The knife scratched the Emperor's face, barely missing his eye. On the end of the knife, there was an envelope. He started to stroll away as he dusted his white gloves. The envelope contains a message and the demands of the Sorcerer King. Obey and survive. Resist, and even your previously mentioned pathetic gods could not save you from the wrath of the Supreme Beings. He glanced back to him with his bored face. Remember, we can reach you and anyone you love anytime, anywhere. With that, he and the creatures behind him disappeared like they had never been there. The Emperor started to massage his face as he inspected the message. What do we do now, Your Majesty?" As Mold read the message, he grit his teeth. "Double the guards around the palace and the patrols in the city. Place a high bounty on that boy's head." Marquis Marcus bowed his head respectfully. Suddenly, a voice that was clear as a bell cut through the quiet air in the palace. "Your Majesty." The disrespectful person appearing before the Emperor was the princess. In other words, one of the Emperor's daughters. She had flame-like vermilion hair and white porcelain skin that was accentuated by her white silk garment. Kneeling on one knee, she displayed flawless court etiquette. As she stormed into the throne room, she spotted the bodies around the throne. She gasped. What happened? Humph. Somehow one of the enemy assassins managed to sneak into the chamber and tried to assassinate me. Fortunately, my guards chased him off before he could finish his work. Your Majesty is alright? Pina asked in a concerned tone. I'm fine. My attacker was a professional, but even he could not stand a chance against me. Fortunately, he was young and inexperienced. Emperor Mold smiled bitterly. Marquis Marcus threw a concerned look at his emperor. This is not a game. The Empire is now having an emergency, and you have been almost assassinated. What has your Majesty done to curb this problem? Is your Majesty getting senile? Such sharp words emerged from her beautiful face. The princess' tongue was sharp as usual. Your Highness, what urgent matters do you have to barge into the chambers of His Majesty? Asked her Marcus. If the Emperor's third daughter, Pina Colada, just sat still with a smile on her face, she would look like an excellent work of art. However, her sharp tongue has been said to have made weak men faint, an infamous ability in the Empire. Obviously, it's about the bandits occupying Arns and Del's Hill. It seems that till this day the two holy places are still under their control. I couldn't imagine that your Majesty would still sit with such a relaxed posture after hearing what happened to the Allied army. Marquis, have you reported the facts to His Majesty? Your Highness, I certainly did give the report. The Alliance army did suffer heavy losses, but they defended bravely against the enemy's invasion of the Failmark continent. Thanks to the courageous Alliance army who sacrificed their lives in the battle, the enemy has received both physical and psychological damage and are shivering in fear as they have built strong forts in panic, hiding within like hibernating bears. Such enemies are no threat to us at all. After hearing Marquis Marcus's words, Pina replied with HMPH. And what about the other invading force? What is your Majesty planning to do with them? Everything is under our complete control. Mold assured her. I'm not a kid anymore. I know that is how things are put across to children, but to turn not one but two armies' complete defeat into victory is unheard of. It's the truth. The Emperor looked bored because of this conversation, but deep inside he was concerned. So you are going to sacrifice the truth and paint the history books with your lies? Even if you put it like that, I cannot answer. Mold dismissed her claim. You sly courtier. Aren't the holy hills of Arns and Del still under the enemy's complete control? Did they defend successfully? The truth is that the foot of the hill is filled with corpses. It's true that we took some losses. The Emperor looked off to the side with a bored expression. Then, what are we going to do from now on? Marquis Marcus played dumb while explaining to her the projects such as recruitment of new troops and their training. Pina clicked her tongue annoyingly at Marcus's words that anyone who was army-related would know about. How many years do you think it will take? Could you ensure that the two invading forces will just sit quietly and wait? Your Highness. I am aware of that. But currently, all we can do is to follow the steps of recruiting, training and rebuilding of the army. Even the vassal states have lost their troops. Even if another alliance army were formed, the time needed for it to become reality would be proportional to the national strength. Even if the other countries reconstructed their armies later than this, they would catch up sooner or later. Hearing this, Pina exclaimed astonishingly, it would be impossible to defend against the invaders if we wait that long. Sighing, Emperor Mold held up his hand to stop their bickering. Based on his observations, Pina had the tendency to cause unrest. Those without responsibilities were like this, always criticizing but had no constructive suggestions. Even if they had made suggestions, it was all wishful thinking that disrespected the traditions and social status of others. If someone voiced objections against them, they would counter by asking what would you do then? For example, the only solution now is to follow the steps Marquis Marcus had said. Buying time for that would be dependent on diplomacy. To achieve that, the Emperor's plan to gather the vassal country's troops and eliminate them in one go was successful. The resigned Emperor shrugged and said to his daughter, if you put it this way, Pina, I have something to say. Yes, Your Majesty. Regarding the enemies on the two holy hills, the information we have in our hands right now is very limited. Why don't you go check it out? Me. Yes. We're still rebuilding the Empire's army, so we are lacking scouts and can't draw them from our standing army. The enlisting and training of new recruits will need time, as Marquis Marcus said. The only troops that are free and are adequately trained would be your Order of Knights. If the knights are not your playmates for pretend games, that is, under the provoking gaze of the Emperor, Pina shut her lips. For knights, who were mocked and accused of playing a game at pretending, although they took pride in being assigned missions, the contents of the mission were dissatisfying. Also, she and her order of knights had zero experience in a real battle. Could she and her knights complete this dangerous mission? The emperor glanced towards her lazily. Well then. Do you accept this order? Gritting her teeth, Penny raised her head with a determined look and, I have received it. After she had said those proud words, Emperor Mole responded ceremoniously. Then I shall look forward towards your achievements. Well then, father. I shall be on my way. With that, Penny Colada turned her back to the throne as she left the hall. Scene change. Somewhere in the Empire's territory, two figures strolled under the blazing sun of the continent of Falmard. Their way led near the road in the forest, so the two of them did not really recognize anything from the blazing sun above them because the woods covered their steps in shadows. One of them was a broad, black-clad warrior who wore a crimson cape on his back with two huge two-handed swords that hung on his back beneath the cape. The other was a slender woman who wore a long hooded coat and under it a metallic-looking armored suit. On her side, a katana hung lazily. Everyone who saw this duo would surely say they were no ordinary people. From their equipment, posture and dignity as the two of them carried themselves, anyone might mistake the duo for veteran soldiers or mercenaries who earned enough to buy such expensive equipment. I hope you are wearing the ring of concealing. It would be pretty unfortunate if someone recognizes us, said the black-clad warrior. The woman beside him nodded. I equipped it and activated the anti-spy measurements. So no one can spy on us or even hear what we're saying without our will. Here, take this and activate it. So you don't have to be beside me to be affected by the effect of my new anti-spy enchantment. Momo nodded. Took the item from his companion's hand, equipped and activated it. It had been 2 days since the duo left the newly built fortress down in the special area. Since then they just walked, hoping the two players could find a new adventure and excitement that both of them had been craving for a long time. Being a king in a kingdom that had no inner or outer enemies is utterly boring. No challenges remained in the Sorcerer's Kingdom. So, what do you think, Momon-san? About what? The black-clad warrior turned to his companion. Well, about...
Puerta. Así el reino hechicero luchó allí por Obligón 2991 editor de copias. Wargot 46 revisado por Pervisaje Chu. Gracias por leer mi fanfic. Mi lengua materna no es el inglés, así que tenga paciencia con cualquier problema gramatical que mi esclavo personal, Olpervi, haya pasado por alto. No soy dueño de la novela o serie de anime Overlord, UUL Berndo, creada por Kugane Maruyama. No soy dueño de Gate, Geita Ikano Kinite, la novela de Kaku Tatakaeri y la serie de anime, escrita por Takumi Yanai. Tampoco soy responsable de esos despreciables actos de depravación sexual que Olpervi cometió en el agujero de aspecto sexy en ese árbol pobre e inocente en su patio trasero. Por favor revise mi historia. Sé que cometeré errores que pretendo corregir y trataré de aprender de mis errores y mejorarme. Gracias. Disfruta la historia. Capítulo 3. Solo un poco de exploración y administración 2 semanas antes de que la fuerza expedicionaria llegara a la región especial. Los ojos del legado Octavianus se abrieron de golpe. Lo que apareció en su visión fue un techo extraño. Estaba hecho con piedra y tenía incrustados objetos blancos brillantes. Trató de mirar a su alrededor para comprender cómo había llegado allí, pero se dio cuenta de que su cabeza no se movía en absoluto. Luego recordó lo que sucedió antes de que todo se quedara en blanco. Esos monstruos, tragó saliva mientras pensaba en esto. Trató de mover sus extremidades y su cabeza. No era solo su cabeza, sino que no podía mover todo su cuerpo. Era como si tuviera algo atado alrededor de las muñecas, los tobillos, la cintura y el pecho. Esta incomprensible situación lo llenó de miedo, y quiso gritar, pero algo se le quedó atascado en la boca, por lo que no podía hablar ni cerrar la boca por completo. Cuando trató desesperadamente de mirar a su alrededor forzando la vista, una voz habló. Omai, Youre Awakenou. The other seven not awakened yet. But don't worry, they will be awakening when their time comes. The creature had a guttural voice. It was hard to tell whether the voice belonged to a man or a woman. It had the body of a woman, but the head of a deformed octopus. The 6 long, skirming tentacles attached to its head extended all the way down to its legs. The thing that appeared in its unmoving sight was a disgusting monster. The skin color was milky white, like the waxy flesh of someone who had drowned. On the bloated corpse like body was clothing made with black leather which barely covered anything. The cloth wrapped tightly around its body, like a butcher's to in up a piece of meat, and it could be described as nothing but grotesque. If a beauty had worn it, it would have been attractive, but on a monster like this, it was nauseating. On each hand were 4 webbed fingers. It had long fingernails, with strange and bizarre nails on them. 10 heard another voice. But it was clearly a female one. The other female snickered as she walked into his field of vision. The legate clearly saw who it was. She was a woman around 20 years old, with short blonde hair and delicate features, vertically split red pupils, 2 cat hairs on the top of her head and a tail that sprouted from the upper part of her butt. Her armor was a revealing top with a short battle skirt and 2 black feathered angel wings sprouted out from her back. Till the cuckoo. Nia. As our guest finally awakened, Nia. As you say Clementine-chan. Our guest has finally woken up. Answered the abomination. This strange heteromorphic vein turned its pupils white, blue eyes on him. Fufufu, did you sleep well? HFF, 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 HFF. The legate could not answer because of the mouth lock in his mouth. Fear and panic welled up within him. Gripped by those two emotions, he could only let out a harsh breathing noise. The monster touched his cheek softly like a mother trying to calm a scared child. But the cold and mushy feelings of the hand sent chills all over his body. It would have made perfect sense if the pungent smell of blood or rotten flesh had wafted over, but the creature smelled like fragrant flowers. This only amplified his fear. My, to think it shrink this much. There's no need to be scared. Clementine sat on his groin and leaned above him. Till the Nia. You smell delicious. I don't even know what to do with you first. Play with you or simply torture you until you lose your mind. The last is more tempting by the way. Nia delegate says with the 2 monsters gaze was towards his lower body. From the sensation of her on his skin, he realized that he was completely naked. Cuckoo, snickered the bloated creature. First the work, Clementine-chan, then the pleasure. You know the supreme beings will not tolerate failure. Till the Nia. You are boring, Neuronist-chan. But if this is the supreme being's wish, then so be it. She shot a lustful glance towards the legate. Mindy fears your name. It tapped its slender finger on its cheek and tilted its head while asking. The pose would have looked good if it was a beauty, but a monster that looked like a drowned corpse with an octopus for a head only evoked disgust and fear. The legate did not answer. El monstruo sonrió al aterrorizado hombre que solo podía mover los ojos. Los tentáculos cubrieron su boca y su expresión apenas cambió. A pesar de eso, sabía que estaba sonriendo porque sus ojos como cuentas se habían entrecerrado. Clementine se rió entre dientes. Tilde ufufufu, parece que nuestro invitado es tímido. Nia. Ufufu. Qué lindo. No seas tan tímido. Neuronist se inclinó sobre él. La yema del dedo del monstruo se deslizó por su pecho como si estuviera escribiendo algo, pero todo lo que podía sentir era miedo que sentía como si le estuvieran arrancando el corazón. Onesante dirá el nombre de ella y su hermana primero era un tono de voz seductor y dulce que sonaba como si las marcas de un corazón salieran de ellos. Soy el recolector de información especial de la gran tumba de Nazarit, neuronista. Jeje, y esta linda chica encima de ti es mi asistente y ayudante Clementine-chan. Clementine saludó y sonrió con una expresión seductora. Tilde, es un placer conocerte, Nia. También nos llaman interrogadores. Los largos tentáculos se separaron y revelaron una boca circular en la base del tentáculo. En medio de filas de dientes afilados como navajas, salía un tubo que se parecía a una lengua. Realmente parecía una pajita roja. Clementine usó sus largas uñas para dañar un poco la piel del pecho del legado. Pequeñas gotas de sangre comenzaron a fluir de la herida. El legado estaba completamente aterrorizado al ver los juegos sádicos de los 2 monstruos. Conocía muchas tácticas de tortura. Incluso había participado en muchos escenarios de tortura. Pero nunca pensó en lo que podrían estar sintiendo sus víctimas cuando los torturadores las torturaran. Sintió miedo como nunca antes. Sabía que el imperio trajo la ira de los dioses sobre sí mismos cuando el emperador envió una fuerza invasora a este mundo. Y le rezó a Emroy, el dios de las tinieblas, para que su muerte fuera lo más indolora posible y se llevara a ese maldito tonto de Molt con él. Sin embargo, quería vivir. Quería sobrevivir. Quería estar fuera de este horrible lugar. Al diablo con el imperio. Al diablo con el emperador. Solo quiero vivir. Suplicó en su alma. Ahora. Fuiste capturado por nosotros. Tilde cucucucu. De hecho. Serás nuestro nuevo juguete. Nia, por favor, diviértete. Dijo la mujer rubia en broma. Pero ni siquiera sabes dónde estás. ¿Verdad? Se burló de él la criatura hinchada. El neuronista se rió. Tilde, deberíamos decírselo. ¿Nia? Preguntó Clementine. Neuronista sintió y luego se volvió hacia él. Esta es la gran tumba de Nazarik. El lugar donde residen dos de los 41 seres supremos, Ain-sama y Esdeath-sama. Es el lugar más sagrado de todo el reino hechicero. ¿Einusawa? ¿Esueath-sawa? Sí, Ain-sama y Esdeath-sama. Neuronista sintió. Neuronista y Clementine lo entendieron perfectamente a pesar de su incapacidad para hablar correctamente. Clementine saltó a su lado y comenzó a preparar las herramientas de tortura. They are two of the 41 supreme beings. Ain-sama ruled over the other supreme beings in the past, and is very, very cool. If you look at him once, you will want to swear loyalty with your heart and Esdeath-sama enforces will by any means necessary. Neuronist paused for a moment. She led his army through the trenches of the enemy lines and crushed them without hesitation. She developed a very cold torturing device you know. She even bestowed one tome my job as here. Ufuzu. The supreme beings are truly generous towards us lowly beings. She fidgeted, no, he glad as if she was embarrassed. They don't want to hear something. The two of them are gods, but they still remain amongst us. They did not abandon us. This is why we always remain faithful towards them and pray that the other 39 will return one day. What? Gods? Imposible. But thinking back about those creatures. Y fue attacked the domain of gods, oh, Embroy. Sabeus. Like at Miguel playing with her finger, she traced letters across his naked body. Clementine finished the preparations of the torturing tools. Till the neuronist Chan. I prepared the tools. Nia. Neuronist turned their tentacled face back to him. How unfortunate. Ah, it makes my body feel electrified. Ara, I'm sorry. I been talking only about myself. The wire body twitched in the light called Tom in the writhing movements of a giant, screaming maggot. Don't mind me. Neuronist ignored his thoughts and continued. Now, should I tell you about your fate? Do you know what a choir is? Evelyn queda de unexpected question. Looking at his surprised expression, Neuronist assumed they did not know what a choir was and explained. A choir is a group of people that sing hymns praising God's love and glory. I want you to become one of them, along with all your little friends. E turned his eyes with a great deal of effort and saw his other soldiers bound to the torturing tables beside him. If that was all, then it was not much. He was not very confident in his singing, but he was not toned a fighter. But was this monster really talking about something like singing? He could not the soon as that arose like the unaged neuronist. Till the sinus the melody of your suffering. Nia. Said Clementine playfully. That's right, a choir. Even fools like you that haven't sworn loyalty to the supreme beings can dedicate their voices to sing their praises. The goal is a chorus. Ah, how electrifying. It's Neuronist gospel music devoted to the supreme beings. A cloudy color spreading its revolting edges. Was that because it was excited by its thoughts? Its fingers wiggled like worms. Fufufufu, now will introduce you to the ones who will support you in your chorus. As if they had been waiting in a corner, several figures came into view. He stopped breathing the moment he saw them. It was obvious that they were evil creatures. It was as if these demons from the ancient tales had come alive. Blaule atera clung tightly to their figures. Their skin was ghastly pale, almost transparent, and dark veins were visible as if their blood was purple. They wore thick blaule ater masks with no visible openings, which made him curious about how they could see or breathe. Their arms were long as well. They were about 2 meters in height, but their arms were long enough to reach their knees. Each of them had a belt on their waist, with numerous tools hanging off them. There were 4 of them in total. Their torturers. They're going to help me and Clementine Chan assist you and your little invader companions sing a beautiful song. A dangerous premonition. He finally realized what it meant by singing and struggled to escape. However, he still could not move. It's no settled. It's not going to break from some of your strength. They'll cast a healing magic over and over, so you can get plenty of opportunities to practice. Neuronist said this as though she were extending the hand of mercy to him, but she did so in the cruelest of tones. THNGDUMUS. Don't do this. Pleaded delegate. Tilde Ara. It seems our guest does not want to participate in the chorus. Don't you think that is quite rude of him, Neuronist Chan? Nia. Indeed, Clementine Chan. It is rude for a guest to refuse to sing in the chorus. Please sing to us your melody for the supreme beings. Pretty please. Neuronist spoke softly to the man who had tears rolling down from his eyes. Then the 6 tentacles skirmed. Listen well. Because the 2 of them remained, were created by the 41 supreme beings, were allowed to exist. Our very existence is to serve in Sama and Death Sama. To you think well shown a shred of merkitos on me filthy tieves who invaded the domains of our gods. We factly rule GWPPH. It to the infect HFPPFNGS GAM. We are really sorry. It will not happen again. That's right. Regret is a valuable thing. Shall you start the song, Clementine Chan? Tilde Nia. Let's start it. IOPT will last longer than the previous ones. Nia. Shelly their lips. Neuronist picked a patin rod from somewhere. At the end of the rod were spikes that were roughly 5 millimeters long. Let's start with this. Neuronist kindly explained the very little detail to the man who didn't understand anything about it all. My creator said to suffer from a bit of a problem called kidney stones. To pay respects to that, well start with this. Since it became so small, I don't think we'll have much problem putting it in. THNGDUMUS. Don't do this. Neuronist took its face closer to the man who was screaming out in the realization of what would happen to him. We're going to spend a long time to get there. You shouldn't start crying because this is only the beginning. Clementine Chan and I waited a long time for new recruits for our chorus. Clementine chuckled while her face twisted into an unnaturally wide smirk. Till the let the song begin. Nia. Scene change. Ula Pianca, Imperial Castle, each day, hundreds of lords and nobles would visit the Imperial Castle. The Empire used its effort and resources to build it as huge and ostentatious as the Empire was able to. Showing their strength to the allied countries. Ensuring their loyalty. After all, the Empire enforced its rule mostly through a show of force, not diplomacy. The castle was always a busy place to be. Senators, nobles, and courtiers came and went each day, treating politics like a chore. Under the meetings, they would enjoy delicious foods, graceful dancers, gambling, courting before engaging in dialogues. That was the general feel of it. The nobles might even decide on the deployment of armies based on the number of games they played. However, in the current situation, this was not the case. No all of them looked worried. According to what the returning troops had reported, the enemy was not even human. They were more like demons with incredibly powerful magic that shattered the sky, raised the dead and even summoned the demons of far from her underworld residence. According to the reports, the battlefield was like the god themselves had allied with each other just to punish the empire for its sins. All senators and nobles knew the empire was far from perfect but that they didn't deserve such punishment from the gods. No one knew and because of this, they were afraid. Also, because no one knew what could offend the gods to cause them to rain such punishment, they did not know how to make it right. Por eso nadie pudo apreciar la buena música, la comida y los bailarines que el palacio ofrecía a sus huéspedes. Sus estómagos se revolvieron y simplemente no pudieron tomar nada de la comida y la bebida después de leer el informe de las aplastantes derrotas. Después de todo, acababan de perder lo que hizo que el imperio mantuviera su posición dominante entre los países mientras estaba bajo el reinado del emperador Modsol Augustus, su abrumadora fuerza militar y riqueza. Incluso un niño sabría que estas eran las razones por las que muchos países temían al imperio. Ahora bien, se podría decir que el imperio perdió un brazo. Como los generales y nobles de la corte formaban parte de la expedición, hubo una enorme cantidad de bajas. Con un número tan destacado de muertos, los nobles tuvieron que pasar el día corriendo de un funeral a otro. El propio emperador organizó la ceremonia con ropa de luto y, sin embargo, los días de descanso del castillo imperial continuaron. Su Majestad, el ejército de la Alianza ha sufrido una gran derrota. Los muertos y desaparecidos han llegado a los 60.000. Si incluimos a los que resultaron heridos pero aún pueden retomar sus funciones, son alrededor de 100.000. Los supervivientes de los ejércitos de la Alianza han regresado a sus respectivos países. Estos números no incluían a los ogros, duendes y gigantes. Los semihumanos que tenían una inteligencia inferior fueron tratados como caballos de guerra. Al escuchar el informe del ministro del Interior, Marquis Marcus, el emperador asintió con la cabeza con cansancio. Tal como estaba planeado. Los senadores cobardes que tenían miedo después de que sufrimos algunas pérdidas ya no tienen nada de qué preocuparse. ¿Qué pasa con la otra fuerza de expedición? El senador apretó los dientes antes de responder a su emperador. Se han ido, mi emperador. ¿Qué? Los ojos del emperador Mod se agrandaron. ¿Qué acabas de decir? Se han ido. Los soldados que regresaron hablaron sobre algún tipo de ejército de dioses. La mayoría de ellos se volvieron locos. El emperador suspiró al escuchar la impactante noticia. Traed ante mí al superviviente de mayor rango. Uno de sus guardias saludó respetuosamente y fue a buscar al superviviente. Pero emperador, el movimiento de los enemigos desde más allá de las puertas es una gran preocupación. Según nuestros exploradores, ambos ejércitos enemigos lograron construir una fortaleza fortificada alrededor de las estructuras. El senador prosiguió. Esto es desconcertante. Pero el imperio ha ganado antes contra mayores probabilidades. El imperio sobrevivirá sin importar qué, dijo el emperador Morg mientras sostenía su cabeza con el puño y miraba hacia el costado con una expresión aburrida. Perdóneme, Majestad. Pero no comparto su opinión sobre nuestra situación. Me preocupa. Ya es bastante malo que nuestra primera fuerza de expedición haya sido repelida con tanta facilidad. Pero la derrota de nuestro segundo ejército de expedición fue aplastante para el imperio. Perdimos 2/5 partes de nuestra fuerza militar total. Aún así, no es un problema a largo plazo. La distancia entre la capital y las colinas sagradas de Dalnus y Ernus es grande. Simplemente usamos esta posición estratégica para nuestra ventaja. El enemigo tendrá que penetrar profundamente en nuestro territorio para llegar a la capital. Simplemente usaremos la táctica de tierra quemada combinada con ataques a sus líneas de suministro. Ningún ejército puede marchar sin suministros. El emperador prosiguió. Si los enemigos comenzaban a mover sus piezas, todas las ciudades y pueblos que conducen al imperio deberían ser quemadas, los pozos envenenados y la comida incautada hasta el último grano de trigo. Por lo tanto, en medio de la tierra quemada, ningún ejército podría obtener suministros y, por lo tanto, esto detendrá su avance. Con esto, no importa cuán fuertes sean su ejército y sus magos, surgirá una oportunidad para que muestren su debilidad. Si no hubiera forma de buscar suministros a nivel local, los suministros tendrían que enviarse desde su propio país. Sería una carga considerable para sus caballos, y la línea de suministro tendría que estar protegida contra incursiones ocasionales de bandidos. De esta manera, el potencial de combate del enemigo se vería disminuido en gran medida cuanto más se acercaran a la capital, dando al ejército del imperio la ventaja al luchar cerca de la capital. Si construían fortalezas en varios lugares y obligaban a los enemigos a sangrar, los enemigos se derrumbarían gradualmente bajo presión. Esa fue la base de la ciencia militar de este mundo. Haz que los enemigos avancen profundamente en el territorio del enemigo y golpéalos cuando estén cansados. Sin duda, era una táctica eficiente y fácilmente comprensible en cualquier mundo. Sin embargo, las tácticas de tierra quemada convertirían sus propias tierras en tierra quebradiza, y sería difícil deshacer el daño. Tales tácticas ignoraban el sustento de la gente al robarles su comida y agua, y el apoyo de la gente se perdería. Por lo tanto, la gente tendría un resentimiento hacia el gobierno que duraría por generaciones. Teniendo en cuenta todos estos inconvenientes, era difícil emitir esas órdenes políticamente. Sin embargo, los ingresos fiscales disminuirían. Marquis Marcus usó una manera reservada para articular el daño que se haría a la gente. El emperador solo dijo HMPH. Simplemente cancele algunos desfiles planeados y posponga los planes para la villa imperial. Y con esto, el emperador Mol desestimó las preocupaciones. Para el poderoso imperio, el sufrimiento de la gente y la aprobación de los ciudadanos eran detalles triviales. Se habló de que el marqués Cassel armaba un escándalo. ¿Por qué tengo que preocuparme por la cordura del marqués Cassel? Parece que él y algunos senadores están conspirando para declarar el estado de emergencia. El abogado del Senado podría vetar las órdenes del emperador. El Senado incluso tenía el poder de destituir al emperador. En la historia del imperio, el número de casos en los que los tronos de los emperadores se vieron amenazados por el Consejo del Senado no fue bajo. HMPH, qué interesante. Solo déjalos hacer lo que quieran. Quién sabe, esta puede ser una oportunidad para reunir a todos esos conspiradores al mismo tiempo. Ordena al Consejo Privado que investigue este asunto. Marcus tenía una expresión de asombro en su rostro por un segundo, pero aún así se inclinó respetuosamente hacia el emperador. El arma del emperador contra el Senado fue el delito de traición. Se requirió que el Consejo Privado presentara pruebas para sentenciarlos. Parece que muchos han dado por sentado el privilegio de ser un senador. Parece que es hora de eliminar las malas hierbas. Tanto Marcus como el emperador Mold miraron en la dirección de los pasos que golpeaban el suelo de mármol. Todos vieron a un joven que se les acercaba al final del salón del trono. Vestía un uniforme de mayordomo estándar con chaleco y guantes de mayordomo blancos. Uno de sus ojos estaba cubierto con un parche y el otro atenuado con una tenue luz azul. En su hermoso rostro joven, se instaló un tono suave e inexpresivo. Casi alcanzó a Mold y Marcus. Los guardias del emperador salieron corriendo de detrás de las columnas de la sala del trono y crearon un muro de escudos ante su emperador. El emperador Molt, a pesar de su sorpresa, aún mantuvo su expresión arrogante y superior. ¿Quién eres, chico? No recuerdo haber enviado a buscarte. El joven inclinó la cabeza. Sin embargo, el emperador, a pesar de sus largos años de política, no pudo leer nada en su rostro anodino. Era una mirada completamente aburrida e inexpresiva. Soy Zero Rey, el fiel sirviente de los seres supremos. ¿Seres supremos? Nunca he oído hablar de ellos, pensó Molt. ¿Y por qué estás aquí? No conozco a ningún senador que se llame Ser Supremo. Dijo el emperador con altivez mientras se burlaba de Zero. Traigo un mensaje del rey hechicero, Ainzo o algo dijo en su tono todavía tranquilo y sereno. Nunca he oído hablar de él y de su país. Debe ser un gobernante en un pequeño país remanso si ni siquiera yo, el emperador del imperio saderano, me enteré de él. Debe ser un gobernante insignificante. Los ojos del extraño se entrecerraron y desapareció. Los guardias de honor comenzaron a buscarlo. Lo más probable es que se acobardara y se fuera. Dijo el emperador de manera burlona. Entonces sintió que alguien agarraba su túnica y lo elevaba en el aire. No pruebes mi paciencia. Mis amos son pacientes, pero no se puede decir lo mismo de mí. No me importa si te burlas de mí. Pero si te burlas de los seres supremos y sus dominios, eso significa que te burlas de mí, mi creador y mis dioses. Dijo en un tono extremadamente frío. Un sudor frío recorría la columna vertebral de todos. El emperador Molt luchó por liberarse de su agarre. A pesar de la delgada estructura de sus brazos, su agarre era irracionalmente fuerte. Era como si estuviera siendo estrangulado por Roger Reaper, el apóstol de Embroy. ¿A qué dioses sirves, muchacho? Embroy. Ardi. Palapón o Duncan. Su expresión engreída permaneció. No sé nada de esos seres patéticos de los que hablas. Pero si se rebelan contra los seres supremos, serán aniquilados. El emperador se limitó a sonreír mientras luchaba contra el agarre del niño. Uno de los guardias intentó apuñalarlo por la espalda con su lanza. Pero cuando la lanza alcanzó a sus oponentes, simplemente se rompió en pedazos. El joven miró por encima del hombro hacia su atacante con su expresión todavía aburrida en su rostro. Mata a los guardias. Dio la orden con un tono frío y sin emociones. Los guardias comenzaron a derrumbarse todos a la vez cuando muchos asesinos de 8 filo aparecieron de sus escondites y degollaron al guardia con un simple movimiento. Los guardias se ahogaron rápidamente en su propia sangre. Los asesinos de 8 filos son seres mágicos con una forma de cuerpo similar a la humana que usan un disfraz de ninja araña negro que tiene 8 patas que son como afiladas hojas. Son capaces de hacerse invisibles de forma pasiva y pueden suspenderse en un techo como un murciélago. Cada una de sus 8 patas les permite pegarse al techo, unidas con una navaja. En el momento en que saltan hacia su presa, podría lanzar 8 ataques simultáneos. Su habilidad consiste en matar a sus presas con un solo golpe en la cabeza. Los ojos de Marco y el emperador se abrieron al ver a sus veteranos guardias de honor asesinados tan fácilmente por las criaturas que aparecían repentinamente. Zero arrojó a Molt a su asiento y luego arrojó un cuchillo al lado de su cabeza. El cuchillo raspó el rostro de los emperadores, y apenas pasó por alto su ojo. Al final del cuchillo había un sobre. Comenzó a alejarse mientras se quitaba el polvo de los guantes blancos. El sobre contiene un mensaje y las demandas del rey hechicero. Obedece y sobrevive. Resiste, e incluso tus dioses patéticos mencionados anteriormente no podrían salvarte de la ira de los seres supremos. Lo miró con su rostro aburrido. Recuerde. Podemos comunicarnos con usted y con sus seres queridos en cualquier momento y lugar. Con eso, él y las criaturas detrás de él desaparecieron como si nunca hubieran estado allí. El emperador comenzó a masajearse la cara mientras inspeccionaba el mensaje. ¿Qué hacemos ahora, su majestad? Mientras Molt leyó el mensaje, apretó los dientes. Duplica los guardias alrededor del palacio y las patrullas en la ciudad. Pon una gran recompensa por la cabeza de ese chico. Marquis Marcus inclinó la cabeza respetuosamente. De repente, una voz que fue clara como una campana cortó el aire tranquilo en el palacio. Su majestad. La persona irrespetuosa que apareció ante el emperador fue la princesa. En otras palabras, una de las hijas del emperador. Tenía el pelo vermellón como una llama y la piel de porcelana blanca que se acentuaba con su prenda de seda blanca. Arrodillándose sobre una rodilla, mostró una impecable etiqueta de la corte. Cuando irrumpió en la sala del trono, vio los cuerpos alrededor del trono. Ella jadeó. ¿Qué pasó? De alguna manera uno de los asesinos enemigos logró colarse en la cámara y trató de asesinarme. Afortunadamente, mis guardias lo persiguieron antes de que pudiera terminar su trabajo. ¿Su majestad está bien? Preguntó Pina en tono preocupado. Estoy bien. Mi atacante era un profesional, pero ni siquiera él tenía ninguna posibilidad contra mí. Afortunadamente, era joven e inexperto. El emperador Molt sonrió amargamente. Marquis Marcus lanzó una mirada de preocupación a su emperador. Esto no es un juego. El imperio ahora tiene una emergencia, y casi has sido asesinado. ¿Qué ha hecho su majestad para frenar este problema? ¿Su majestad se está volviendo senil? Palabras tan agudas surgieron de su hermoso rostro. La lengua de la princesa estaba afilada como de costumbre. Su Alteza, ¿qué asuntos urgentes tiene para irrumpir en las cámaras de su majestad? Le preguntó Marcus. Si la tercera hija del emperador, Piña Colada, se quedara quieta con una sonrisa en el rostro, se vería como una excelente obra de arte. Sin embargo, se ha dicho que su lengua afilada ha hecho que los hombres débiles se desmayen, una habilidad infame en el imperio. Obviamente, se trata de los bandidos que ocupan Arnus y Dalnusil. Parece que hasta el día de hoy los dos lugares sagrados todavía están bajo su control. No podía imaginar que su majestad todavía se sentaría con una postura tan relajada después de escuchar lo que sucedió con el ejército aliado. Marqués, ¿ha informado de los hechos a su majestad? Su Alteza, ciertamente di el informe. El ejército de la Alianza sufrió grandes pérdidas, pero se defendió valientemente contra la invasión enemiga del continente Falmart. Gracias al valiente ejército de la Alianza que sacrificó sus vidas en la batalla, el enemigo ha recibido daños físicos y psicológicos y están temblando de miedo mientras han construido fuertes en pánico, escondiéndose dentro como osos hibernando. Tales enemigos no son una amenaza para nosotros en absoluto. Después de escuchar las palabras del marqués Marcus, Piña respondió con un HMPH. ¿Y qué hay de la otra fuerza invasora? ¿Qué planea hacer su majestad con ellos? Todo está bajo nuestro completo control. Molt le aseguró. Ya no soy un niño. Sé que así es como se transmiten las cosas a los niños, pero convertir no uno, sino la derrota total de dos ejércitos en victoria es algo inaudito. Es la verdad. El emperador parecía aburrido por esta conversación, pero, en el fondo, estaba preocupado. ¿Entonces vas a sacrificar la verdad y pintar los libros de historia con tus mentiras? Incluso si lo pones así, no puedo responder. Mol desestimó su afirmación. Cortesano astuto. ¿No están las sagradas colinas de Arnus y Dalnus todavía bajo el completo control del enemigo? ¿Se defendieron con éxito? La verdad es que el pie de la colina está lleno de cadáveres. Es cierto que sufrimos algunas pérdidas, el emperador miró hacia un lado con una expresión aburrida. Entonces, ¿qué vamos a hacer a partir de ahora? Marquis Marcus se hizo el tonto mientras le explicaba los proyectos como el reclutamiento de nuevas tropas y su entrenamiento. Piña chasqueó la lengua de manera molesta ante las palabras de Marcus que cualquiera que estuviera relacionado con el ejército sabría. ¿Cuántos años crees que tomará? ¿Podrías asegurarte de que las dos fuerzas invasoras se sientan en silencio y esperen? Su Alteza. Soy consciente de eso. Pero actualmente, todo lo que podemos hacer es seguir los pasos de reclutamiento, entrenamiento y reconstrucción del ejército. Incluso los estados vasallos han perdido sus tropas. Incluso si se formara otro ejército de la Alianza, el tiempo necesario para que se convierta en realidad sería proporcional a la fuerza nacional. Incluso si los otros países reconstruyeran sus ejércitos más tarde que nosotros, tarde o temprano los alcanzarían. Al escuchar esto, Piña exclamó asombrado. Sería imposible defendernos de los invasores si esperamos tanto. Suspirando, el emperador Molt levantó la mano para detener sus discusiones. Según sus observaciones, Piña tenía tendencia a provocar disturbios. Los que no tenían responsabilidades eran así, siempre criticando pero sin sugerencias constructivas. Incluso si hubieran hecho sugerencias, todo era una ilusión que no respetaba las tradiciones y el estatus social de los demás. Si alguien expresara objeciones en su contra, respondería preguntando ¿qué harías entonces? Por ejemplo, la única solución ahora es seguir los pasos que había dicho Marquis Marcus. Ganar tiempo para eso dependería de la diplomacia. Para lograrlo, el plan del emperador de reunir las tropas del país vasallo y eliminarlas de una sola vez fue un éxito. El emperador resignado se encogió de hombros y le dijo a su hija. Si lo pones así, Piña, tengo algo que decirte. Si su majestad... Con respecto a los enemigos en las dos colinas sagradas, la información que tenemos en nuestras manos en este momento es muy limitada. ¿Por qué no vas a comprobarlo? Sí. Todavía estamos reconstruyendo el ejército del imperio, por lo que nos faltan exploradores y no podemos sacarlos de nuestro ejército permanente. El alistamiento y entrenamiento de nuevos reclutas necesitará tiempo, como dijo el marqués Marcus. Las únicas tropas que están libres y son adecuadamente entrenados sería su orden de caballeros. Si los caballeros no son sus compañeros de juego para los juegos de simulación, eso es, bajo la mirada provocadora del emperador, Piña cerró los labios. Para los caballeros, que fueron burlados y acusados de jugar a fingir, aunque se enorgullecían de que se les asignaran misiones, el contenido de la misión era insatisfactorio. Además, ella y su orden de caballeros no tenían experiencia en una batalla real. ¿Podrían ella y sus caballeros completar esta peligrosa misión? El emperador miró hacia ella con pereza. Bueno, entonces. ¿Aceptas esta orden? Apretando los dientes, Piña levantó la cabeza con una mirada decidida y, lo he recibido. Después de haber dicho esas orgullosas palabras, el emperador Morg respondió ceremoniosamente. Entonces esperaré tus logros. Bueno, padre. Me pondré en camino. Con eso, Piña Colada le dio la espalda al trono al salir del salón. Cambio de escena. En algún lugar del territorio del imperio, dos figuras paseaban bajo el sol abrasador del continente de Falmart. Su camino conducía cerca del camino en el bosque, por lo que los dos realmente no reconocieron nada del sol ardiente sobre ellos porque el bosque cubría sus pasos en sombras. Uno de ellos era un guerrero ancho y vestido de negro que llevaba una capa carmesí en la espalda.